Good afternoon to all of you. It's officially 2 past 2, so let's start this webinar slowly because we have a lot of people registered, more than 400 of you registered. We have already more than 50 people joining, so more will join now. So today we published our geothermal strategy action plan because the European Commission should have it soon published in 2026. This webinar will last for 1 hour and a half, and here the agenda of today. We have really high-level speakers, so we are really glad to have you on board. So first, I will give the floor to our policy director, Sanjeev Kumar, and we will present you the proposal from EGEC on what should be this European Geothermal Strategy and Action Plan, and what we need this action plan to develop geothermal energy. Following this proposal from EGEC, Mechtil Verstoffer, Deputy Director General of DG Energy, will present our view from the European Commission on the role of the EU policies for supporting geothermal development. Following this intervention, Amy Bea, Senior Analyst at IEA, will react on Mechtil proposal and to explain the geothermal energy in a global context following the IEA special report on geothermal last year. Then we'll give the floor to Dave Orstier, member of European Parliament, to give his comment, his view from member of European Parliament on what the Commission should do for geothermal energy. Before giving the floor to Sanjeev, just to give you a picture, we're in 2025, what midterm of what we call a geothermal decade. We are starting to see an exponential growth in the geothermal sector, but we need more to achieve this exponential growth. We need more in many aspects, and Sanjeev now will explain you the detailed proposal that EGEC has to realize this geothermal decade. Sanjeev, the floor is yours to start.
Thank you, Philippe, and welcome everybody for joining us. I'm just going to share my screen now, and you will be able to see my slides. Just give me a second. Voila. Okay, cool. So for those who don't know me, my name is Sanjeev Kumar. I'm the Policy Director at EGEC, and I have the pleasure of walking you through what has been a process that has involved...
Sanjeev, we cannot see your slide yet.
You can't see the slide? Oh,
not yet. I'm sure it's coming.
It should be coming. I hope it is. I hope you can see it. Okay, let's try again. Okay. Can you see my slides? Because these are very good slides. I hope you can see.
It's coming perfect. Full screen mode, and floor is yours.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Philippe. And once again, welcome to everybody. This is detailed thinking that's been put together by various key stakeholders within the geothermal community in Brussels, and taken on board some of the views that we have from people who finance geothermal projects and consumers as well. So this is really the views from the people on what needs to be done in the Geothermal Action Plan strategy, which we are waiting with eager anticipation from the European Commission. So let me just start off. We know we have Jaime from the International Energy Agency, but I just want to put in context the technical potential that geothermal has in its ability to deliver electricity and heat to meet the demand in Africa, China, Europe, Southeast Asia, and the United States. So we're not talking about a niche application, which is the current state of the market today, but something that should be a major part of our energy conversation. We know that there's a full understanding of the political importance of geothermal, as witnessed by Ms. Ursula von der Leyen, the President of the European Commission, who has mentioned geothermal at least 4 occasions just this year, indicating the political importance that the Commission is now putting on geothermal. Here, she clearly recognises that countries with the lowest energy prices, the affordable energy, which is essential for Europe's competitiveness and social cohesion, is found in countries with abundant supplies of solar, wind, hydropower, geothermal, or nuclear. So the question now is how do we deliver what we need to have delivered? But you can see that whilst we're having a conversation at European level, geothermal is taking off all over the world. Over the last couple of years, we've had the United States of America with their GeoVision program, which was published in 2019, followed up with 2 very specific So lift-off packages. The lift-off packages are very similar to the geothermal action plan that the Commission will publish, detailing clear targets and the measures needed to grow the markets for next generation geothermal and for geothermal heating and cooling systems in America. China's 5-year plan has been focused on geothermal for the last couple of decades, and they have gone from zero applications to being one of the leading countries in geothermal heating and cooling systems. But we've also seen many new countries across the globe enter into geothermal. The most recent one was India. In August of this year, they published their national plan for geothermal with a clear target and a clear focus to quickly leapfrog and catch up with the front runners in the geothermal space. Importantly, the Indian government in this plan recognises the need to embrace and incorporate and utilise the expertise of international players to help them in this leapfrogging process. So what we see here is geothermal taking off, but a real desire to get the expertise as quickly as it can. This means Europe has a huge opportunity to export its know-how globally. We also know, and we're going to hear very shortly, that the World Energy Outlook, the Bible for everybody in our world, shows that geothermal is going to quadruple in terms of its capacity everywhere apart from Europe. And that's largely because everywhere else has this dedicated policy vision, which we are hopefully going to get early next year. The purpose of the Geothermal Action Plan and strategy, in our view, is to mainstream and commercialise geothermal energy. This means that Europeans, but people all over the world, will have access to affordable and secure energy, as well as minerals, in order to boost their competitiveness and live in a socially prosperous, mutually prosperous environment. That's the beauty of geothermal. Now, this affordability, competitiveness, and security is already prevalent across many different parts of Europe's economy, let alone the world. You can see the car industry players such as Stellantis, one of the largest players in Europe, has turned to geothermal for affordable energy supplies. When it comes to security, the headquarters of NATO uses geothermal heating and cooling. We have huge high street brands like IKEA, for example, and Alde, who use geothermal heating and cooling in their establishments across Europe. We can also see that it's cost competitive. Again, independent data from the French government, ADIME, the energy agency there, shows that even though there's a slightly higher upfront capital cost, the overall total cost of ownership is significantly cheaper for when it comes to geothermal compared to existing renewables and non-renewable solutions. So the affordability is inherent in the system. We also know that many governments have turned to geothermal. Here you can see an example of the Play de l'Elysée, where President Macron and future presidents of France will be for the next hundreds of years, will be heated and cooled by the geothermal systems that were installed last year. There are also, importantly, hospitals and many public buildings who've invested in geothermal for energy affordability, but also that long-term security that they need to provide and deliver essential services that we as communities rely upon. So geothermal is, to recount, affordable, competitive, and secure. So what do we now need to have from the Geothermal Action Plan? And there are really some core stepping stones that we think are essential in the Commission's proposal. The first one is a target. We have selected a target of 250 gigawatts by 2040. This is based upon a series of models that were run within EGEC, looking at growth forecasts for all of the technologies from heating and cooling to electricity, including storage as well over the next decade and a half. What we know so far is that there's 45.5 gigawatts just in the EU alone. And what we know is in the current pipeline that we have, there's over 100 electricity plants, almost a doubling of the capacity for district heating and cooling, and a robust geothermal heat pump market, which is taking off. So we're growing. As Philippe has mentioned, and as everybody's highlighted, we're not growing quickly enough or where our potential will take us. So what we have seen for similar technologies in the same situation as geothermal, the European Commission has adopted a non-binding, often non-binding target to help focus policy attention to mainstream those technologies. We have seen the rise of biomethane, renewable hydrogen, hydronic heat pumps, solar photovoltaics, synthetic fuels, and wind all have benefited from similar actions to the Geothermal Action Plan. So the target is an essential building block, making the action plan that the Commission launches investment focused. The investments are the things that consumers and producers are prioritising. It's what we also need to protect our energy system and ensure that we address the climate crisis. A crucial element of the Geothermal Action Plan is an element that was proposed by the European Parliament and Europe's energy ministers, which is a focus away from more and more legislation. There is a lot of legislation already in place, but actually working together with companies, with industry, with regulators, the financial community, to make sure that we effectively implement what we already have in place. And through that, we're looking for a commitment from member states. We already have this in the Council conclusions that were published on geothermal in December last year. A call for an industrial alliance. What we now need to do is to implement this. This means establishing some form of control through a board to organise and orientate the work that we do, and then break down into specific activities such as helping countries produce national roadmaps. There are many European countries who've already done so. I've highlighted some of the international ones already. This helps give that local focus on what's needed within a country, but also within local regions, and at the same time recognising that this is part of a broader European push. There are some things which require a better understanding at a European level to ensure that we have harmonisation as much as possible across the 27 member states, but also many other countries in and around Europe who are also looking to the EU for leadership and guidance on developing their own geothermal systems. So permitting, access to data, these are essential parts of a geothermal, the value and lifespan of a geothermal project. They come right at the front, and we need to make sure that we have much clearer understanding and simplification in the context of permitting specifically, which doesn't lead to a reduction in environmental standards. Geothermal has the advantage of being actually a very good steward when it comes to the environment. There's strong leadership. We have always enforced the highest standards for environmental protection, and we want to preserve those. So it's important that we help member states understand that we're maintaining standards, not reducing them. This is vital for the social buy-in, which is very strong for the geothermal sector. Importantly, we don't ask for subsidies. We ask for support mechanisms to allow our sector to leverage as much private capital as we possibly can into the geothermal industry. There are many complaints, and I think complaint is the right word, from the financial community who are saying, we want to invest in geothermal, but there just aren't enough projects for us to invest in. And this is why the target is important, but also the use of public funding to leverage that private capital, which has already been very, very successful in countries such as France, in the Netherlands, in Germany, for example. Belgium and Hungary are another good examples. We need to have this replicated in a more systematic way to really grow that pipeline of investments that will make our economy secure, affordable, and competitive. What we also need to do is to focus on specific sectors, cities, where the bulk of our heating and cooling demand is, rural communities who are an essential part of our social fabric, industrial players from the paper and pulp sector to chemicals to metal industry and non-ferrous metals and ferrous metals in particular, electricity and grid systems. Geothermal has a direct impact in the electricity system, but it also has an indirect one. For example, geothermal heat pumps and district heating systems help reduce the pressure on electricity systems to produce the services of heating and cooling where needed. The agriculture community and food security are essential for Europe's prosperity. That sector in some countries is already heavily invested in geothermal. We need to make sure that all of our agriculture community is protected in Europe and the neighbourhood to allow us to have healthy, good quality food supplies. Finally, there are certain elements of the market chain the workforce, the industry, the made in Europe manufacturing, which is essential to our industry, that also needs to have targeted support. So the whole idea of the Industrial Alliance is to focus on removing barriers wherever they exist in key consumers, but also at a European level to allow geothermal to flourish. I want to deep dive into some of these issues. This is an example with regards to permitting and data and accessibility to data. So renewable acceleration areas, for example, helping countries and permitting agencies to produce something similar to the BRGM data set that we have in France, looking at ways in which you can unify or harmonize the definitions and rules for deeper geothermal projects to allow those larger scale investments to be made, to allow capacity building for the permitting agencies themselves so that we're not overburdening them with endless applications which they do not have the skills to assess in a speedy, efficiently and high quality manner, but also making sure that data is readily accessible. And there are some examples where the lack of readily available data fundamentally changed the business model of the project that was proposed. So getting this data means affordable energy for everybody. And of course, in the world that we live in, making it as almost all of these processes fully digitalized, so we save on printing off paper and actually make applications much more easier to track and to update in real time is essential. When it comes to leveraging private capital, there are really three broad approaches. The first approach is to look at some new instruments, preferably at a European level, which allow us to focus on specific things. A financial de-risking guarantee scheme, not a subsidy, just to allow and cover for geological risk. Some form of grants, specific support for next generation geothermal to help commercialize that. I'm sure we've all heard the news, certainly in the geothermal community, that the EVER project produced its first electrons. We all picked up the press release this morning. That's a great example of Europe supporting the technology and really helping to get it up and running. Now we need to take it to the next level and commercialize these technologies and lift the regulatory framework for the entire industry. All geothermal industry, I should say, looking at specific feed-in tariffs for, specific contracts of difference for geothermal electricity, whilst the CFD model is very good for conventional renewable electricity generators, a bit more is required to design them specifically for geothermal. These are tweaks rather than significant new actions that are required. Then we're looking at taking the existing instruments. I can give you a few examples here: the Sustainable Finance Taxonomy, the Clean Industrial Deal State Aid Framework, which are already very stable and effective models that require a tiny tweak to unlock geothermal investments. These are minor amendments that we're talking about. And then the third and final level is more advisory and guidance. And this is where, for example, working with the European Investment Bank and the global financial community to help better understand what geothermal is, the different types of technologies, what type of financial support they may need or their customers may need in order to make investments into their long-term security and affordable energy. And then finally, the European regulations introduced the renewable heating and cooling purchase agreements a few years ago. Guidance is really needed to drive this market, the same way in which the European Union has provided guidance on power purchase agreements to grow that market. We are not requiring subsidies, we're just requiring a nudge to help us unlock those investments. The next step is to focus in on, as I've mentioned before, a few key sectors to really help maximize private leverage for a specific consumer type. Sectoral agreements, or tripartite agreements, as the European Commission has been calling them recently, have started to be developed. We know there's a few that are going to be announced next week. There should definitely be one for geothermal because of the merits and the benefits that it brings to Europe's energy system. It too deserves to have this type of support to allow its customers to increase their awareness and increase their penetration of the technology. So this is really about maximizing the private leverage where specific tweaks are needed to regulatory frameworks. Those are done, but also using those consumers to do peer-to-peer awareness raising with the rest of their community to really help mainstream geothermal. As I've mentioned before, many international countries have national roadmaps. These are the European ones. These are really important documents because they help focus and address attention on local issues within a member state. You will notice that France has had 3 roadmaps because it's a continuously living process. Once they address one issue, you move on to the next and move on to the next. And really, what France has done here is a good lesson for us all to look at. But there are many important lessons that you can pick up from these other roadmaps. I will pick on 2 examples. One, Poland. There, the Polish roadmap wants to specifically identify geothermal storage, particularly higher temperature borehole storage and higher temperature aquifer storage. So they want to specialize in this one because for them, storage is a key part of the energy transition and the smoothness of it. That's really great strategic thinking. Portugal is a new entrant to the geothermal space. There's, I think, around about 200 geothermal heat pumps installed in the country, but they're now looking at 2 things. Firstly, to reduce the pressure on their electricity system through cooling demand and heating, so geothermal ticks that box, but also to look at ways in which they can start to create network geothermal systems to really spread the technology at scale across the country. And finally, some regions have developed their own geothermal roadmaps. North Brabant region in the southern part of the Netherlands is an example where smaller rural communities came together in order to be scalable enough to get a big series of projects and make themselves bankable to the financial community. So these national regional roadmaps are a critical part of what we want to have. They are policy prescriptive in certain cases, but what they do is they focus attention for local governments and national governments on what needs to be done. And then we move on to the market and value chain development. This is the crucial part of the opportunity that geothermal brings, the non-energy related activities. Some of the leading manufacturers in Europe are the leading manufacturers when it comes to exporting renewable energy technologies across the world. So this made in Europe stamp, this ability to build upon the rich history of engineering and the connection with geothermal, which was founded in Europe, was designed in Europe, and the first installations were built here, has the ability to expand and explore its manufacturing capacity inside Europe, but also export markets outside as the global economy takes off. There's also a need to look at skills, making sure our workforce is fully certified so that each project is done to a high level and there is consistency across the board. This is crucial to our public acceptance, but it's also vital to ensuring that the cost and the production costs of geothermal, the upfront drilling and design processes are as low as possible in order to offer that really competitive, affordably priced energy to consumers. And finally, the Global Gateway. This is an initiative from the European Union to rival the Belt and Road Initiative that China has been operating for the last couple of years. Already there is a focus on minerals, and geothermal lithium is Europe's first step in strategic autonomy, but there are significant opportunities in exporting geothermal expertise and knowledge and technologies to the growing global geothermal world. So this is a huge opportunity. We must be thinking beyond the borders of Europe for geothermal. So on that note, I'd like to thank everybody for the input that they've had into this position paper. You'll be able to download it from our website. The link will be on our screen very shortly. But in the meantime, I want us to act local, think global, and go geothermal. Thank you very much. Over to you, Philippe.
Thank you, Sanjeev. Indeed, this action plan is really good. As you can see in the chat, I put the link if you want to download it. It's available from today about our 9 recommendations. So following this presentation from Sanjeev about the proposal from EGEC, let's now hear from the European Commission the views of EU policies for geothermal energy. Mechthild, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. I'm very happy to address your conference today. Unfortunately, I'm not there in person, but I wanted to say a few words in order to update you what's happening on our side, So since 1 year, this new commission started, and I think it's quite clear that we have a lot of focus on competitiveness, affordability, sustainability, but also security of supply. So this commission engaged in the Clean Industrial Deal, and for us in particular on the action plan of affordable energy. So we are working with the member states. We have created an energy union task force to really complement and increase the cooperation between member states, between stakeholders, with the idea and with the aim of really bringing the energy cost down. We also continue, of course, with the decarbonization agenda, with implementing, for example, the Renewable Directive or the Energy Efficiency Directive or the Energy Performance of Building Directive. All this is important on our way to competitiveness, security, but also decarbonization. In that context, as you well know, heating and cooling plays a crucial role. We all know that 40% of our energy is used in heating and cooling, both of buildings and for industry. And in the last couple of years, not enough have been done. And that's why we are planning for next year, in the first half of the year, what we call a heating and cooling strategy. We want really to look what's happening in the sector, what could we do to tackle the obstacles, why decarbonization is not happening in the heating and cooling sector. We will look at short-term action, we will look at long-term action. We got a lot of excellent input also from your industry, so we will focus on the different technologies, geothermal, of course, heat pumps, other technologies, and the plan is, as my commissioner has also highlighted, to include in this heating and cooling strategy something specific for a geothermal strategy. So this is our aim, and your input and continuous dialogue with you will be important. The aim is that this strategy on heating and cooling is accompanied or is at the same time with something on electrification. So the electrification action plan, where we are also working on about increasing electrification in our end-use sectors, looking at taxes and what can be done at national level, is also a right step, I would say, in the future of decarbonization and competitiveness. So geothermal plays an important role. I had the pleasure to accompany my commissioner, for example, at a visit of a geothermal plant in Berlin 4 weeks ago. And also before, I have been seeing geothermal plants. We are strongly believing this is a potential source which has huge potential in Europe to also be part of that decarbonization of the heating and cooling sector. We have, as I mentioned, a comprehensive legal framework. You all know very well what's in the Renewable Energy Directive. We have dedicated heating and cooling targets. We have simplified the permitting, and we support energy communities and rules enabling heat purchase agreement. We have also some framework in our Energy Efficiency Directive, which promotes the expansion and modernization of district heating based on renewables and requires municipalities to develop their local heating and cooling plans. We are working intensively with our member states, exchange best practice. You can be part of that, your best practices in the different EU member states, so that everyone in Europe can step up and implement what is needed. And as I mentioned, this heating and cooling strategy next year will go much deeper in short-term action for the different technology, for geothermal, and what are the obstacles, what are the predictability needs and the investment needs, because of course we need to invest also in local, regional solution. What can we do more from the Commission side that we decarbonize the heating and cooling sector? So I think the potential and the application of geothermal energy and the awareness we can raise via the heating and cooling, via the geothermal strategy is a good leverage to increase the local, national, and European objectives, but also to identify best practices so they can be replicated. There are already a lot happening in the member states. You are best placed to exchange on that, but we are there to facilitate that and make it even happening further. So very much looking forward and discuss further with you. Have a good conference today and hope to see you soon. We have a lot of occasion to go deeper in what is needed at EU level. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mechtil, for this reaction from the European Commission. So you could see that there will be several initiatives launched next year by the European Commission in policy. She mentioned the electrification plan, the heating and cooling strategy, and hopefully we'll have a dedicated geothermal action plan. Following this presentation from the Commission, it will be good for us, Amy, to hear the view of IEA. Indeed, IEA published in December 2024 a special report on geothermal energy. So what do you think about the future of geothermal energy following this presentation from the Commission? Amy, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I would like to show some slides to support some of the points that I'll try to make. First of all, I think geothermal is getting a lot of attention, and then we are happy at the IEA that we were able to contribute to this discussion and basically make aware among many policymakers that this energy can be part of the targets and planning, as a result of which we see already several actions that are taken by many governments, which come back to us to ask for further support, which we are happy to do. First of all, I think the momentum that Sanjay was mentioned and Mehdi was also alluded in her talk is quite important, because this did not exist 2 years ago. At least it existed in a very small scale. I would like to highlight a few developments over the last days and weeks and months that actually gives us a bit more optimistic view on what geothermal sector can achieve in the coming years. The first one is we heard that in H1 2025, more than $1.7 billion were invested in EGS and hot rock drilling in the United States. Government of the United States is supporting very much geothermal development and innovation. China basically in his guidelines for 15 5-year plan included geothermal as part of the discussion, which is the big deal actually to include in the 5-year plan. But also Sinopec is started to position itself to start doing deep drilling, more than 5 kilometers, and basically wants to invest more in geothermal. But also in the EU, today we saw the press release from EWER that the company started to produce its first electricity with the closed loop system that they've been developing in Germany. But also last week, Vulcan, who we also interacted very much during the making of the geothermal report, they closed a 2.2 billion financing in their combined lithium and geothermal CHP plant in Germany as well. So I think these developments gives us hope. These are additions to what's been happening over the last 2 years, mostly focused in the United States. Now it's becoming a global agenda, and many countries come to the IEA to ask for information, data, help, including advanced economies and developing countries to basically develop their renewable energy, but also specifically geothermal sector. So we published the Future of Geothermal Energy report, which we included a lot of the specific projections for geothermal, and basing our assumptions to one most important thing, which was the cost reduction potential. And this cost reduction potential was at the heart of the untapped potential that geothermal has, because in the end, in order to provide the energy or heat that basically in many countries that the geothermal can do, requires a certain cost levels of achievement in order to do that. So we did with Project Inner Space a collaborative project to identify a global potential for geothermal. And this global geothermal potential at different depth levels show an important technical potential that we did not see before. And you can see in the picture here the traditional geothermal resources that are accessible in the very famous locations such as Iceland, Japan, Indonesia, several parts of Italy, several parts of Africa and Latin America. But when you go deeper, the picture changes drastically at 4,000 meters, and at 7,000 meters, we are seeing the entire world map covered with certain level of potential for electricity generation, which means 150 degrees Celsius and above. And this is quite impressive because we are limiting the geographical restrictions of the geothermal with this potential if we can drill deeper. This is an incredible potential for power generation, which we basically estimated around 600 terawatts of potential, which is significantly higher than today's global installed capacity for power generation, 140 times basically global electricity demand today. It's just second after the solar PV's technical potential, which is significantly higher, about 2,000 terawatts. But tapping this potential for electricity is obviously not a very easy one, but even with tap 1% of this potential means a lot for the geothermal sector in terms of creating the initial volumes to start the cost reduction. But more importantly, for European context, the heat part is also very, very important. We did a similar analysis for heat in terms of looking at the overall global potential at certain degrees for direct heat use applications for sedimentary aquifers. And we have a cutoff point of cost of $50 per megawatt hour for that heat production. We saw that an incredible potential exists even at temperatures at the 60 and 90 degrees, where it can meet a lot of the demand of many industries or heating purposes of homes or commercial applications. Our estimations at 90 degrees, which is about 8 terawatts, is 30 times the energy that the district heating systems currently have today, which serve around 70 million people. The potential in Europe that you see here, about 90, is quite high, obviously, but how to tap this potential and how to take this to a different level, obviously, is relevant to what types of policies that European sector implements. So this is another Project Inner Space release that is happened actually last week, which I highly recommend everybody to look into that. They did a special European potential analysis. Obviously, these analyses that are by the very large data sets and computer programs, they are not basically suggestions for project development in these locations, but it gives a good indication for policymakers about the technical potential that these territories have. And in this case, for heating and cooling, and at the city level, because where all this demand is basically concentrated, here the red dot shows the very good potential in terms of the population, district heating mechanisms, and combination of the distance to basically the closer resources that these areas have. We see that almost all big European countries have a very good potential to use geothermal for heating and cooling purposes, which is a part which Mehdi mentioned very correctly, a bottleneck in increasing the share of renewables in the European system. Why this is a bottleneck? While we are having an important advances on the electricity sector with the deployment of basically wind and solar PV, and now the cheaper batteries that are combining them, direct heat use in industry and buildings is way more difficult to decarbonize. And where electricity cannot be a solution, there are a lot of electrification applications that will happen, but we need to complement this with other direct heat applications, and geothermal is one of the ways, and actually one of the potential ways of decarbonizing a lot of applications going forward. Given this potential, obviously, how to achieve this, as I mentioned, the cost is an important factor here. We need to reduce the costs. In order to reduce the cost, we need to see the demand. In order to see the demand, we need to start with setting ambitious targets within the European Union or at the country level in order to give a signal to the industry, both for heat applications but also for power applications, if the country wants to have further dispatchable renewable power, which is also a limiting factor to deploy more solar PV and wind. Looking at how these cost reductions can happen, it's an example from the electricity sector. We were basically looking at if the geothermal levelized cost of energy can reach at levels for the dispatchable energy that it provides around $50 to $70 per megawatt hour in the coming 5 to 10 years, we will see an important volumes that are unlocked in the industry. And here you can see obviously the oil and gas industry's expertise and how this could be this could reduce the cost reductions to a level that can be competitive with not only with fossil fuel alternatives that can provide around-the-clock energy, but also for significantly more competitive than solar PV plus battery, wind plus battery, and so on and so forth. And there are multiple aspects that we basically unpacked for this cost reduction potential. And obviously, significant majority of the cost reduction potential is the transfer skills from the oil and gas industry, which knows very well the subsurface work and the large project development that is happening. If you look at all around the world, the biggest startups that are drilling today, their main staff or the management or the investors are basically have very good knowledge and experience from oil and gas industry, especially in the United States shale revolution. And obviously the shale revolution brings a lot of the benefits to the picture. I'm well aware that in many European countries, this is basically a sensitive topic, but there are ways to manage the sustainability issues that these drilling techniques have. That's why I think we should not have a blank no to any technology while it comes to developing geothermal. We should just look in carefully to minimize the impacts like any other technology that will provide a lot of energy, including wind, solar, nuclear, and fossil fuel alternatives. In this case, economies of scale, research, and spillover impacts basically account for 90% of the high-level transfer scenario that we did for cost reduction. And oil and gas sector is at the heart of these three aspects, basically that have been experiencing for the last decades, but more importantly for new technologies over the last 15 years. The achievements that the shale revolution had over the last decade or so is incredible in terms of the reducing the costs. If this can be repeated in geothermal drilling, either for electricity or heat production, we will be at a different place today. And I hope that the direction is going towards that with all this new money or investment that is going into the geothermal sector. Obviously, things don't happen by themselves. we need to have a lot of the policies in place to be able to deploy geothermal or expand the volumes. The first suggestion that we have, it is very straightforward and it's quite simple, but it's probably the most important one, is to make geothermal high up in the energy agenda. We have been trying a lot here at the IEA to make this happen in the European Union, in many countries that we interact, without governments or policymakers taking the geothermal into a higher level in their energy agenda. Instead of not mentioning it, many things cannot happen. And this starts with targets, ambitions, roadmaps, not only for power, but for heating and cooling applications. Obviously, the European Union Geothermal Action Plan that is being prepared, and heating and cooling plan and the geothermal inclusion is very welcome. But creating geothermal specific targets and ambitions is very important. And if countries can implement this from taking the European level to their own national level to have ambitious targets, it gives an important volume signal to the industry. And volumes here, which means economies of scale, are extremely important to achieve the cost reductions. When we were looking at the solar PV 15 years ago at the price of 400 euros per megawatt hour, nobody thought that it will be 30 to 35 in the next decade. Nobody thought that it was actually physically or chemically possible to achieve these cost reductions, but it happened. Today, many view the same thing for geothermal, that the cost reduction is extremely limited to go that deep down, basically 3, 4, 5 kilometers, because it's so tough and so difficult and so complicated in terms of the subsurface data. I think similar views exist today, but from the IEA side, we are quite optimistic about what is going on in the market and what can be achieved in terms of the cost reduction. The second component, in countries where subsurface data has good quality and availability, actually public availability in some cases, gives an important playground for the companies to explore the sector. I think there are very good examples of this in Netherlands, when the accessibility of the data is quite wide, and many US institutions with the oil drilling data in the historical data that is available, which provides an important benchmark for developing these projects. The other point is permitting. It is mentioned in any single policy document for any single clean energy technology in European Union, because it's by far the most important thing to get it out of the table before entering into any major investment case. We have been working with the European Union about wind and solar PV permitting over the last 2 years. We did a lot of work with a lot of stakeholders to streamline the permitting and give suggestions. There is a lot of room for improvement there, I think, but the best practices are there as well. We see here at the IEA that once a country takes this seriously, like in Germany, who can take the permitting to a different level, which is much faster, much more reliable, and making the case for renewable energy sources. Obviously, geothermal and drilling around geothermal can have some environmental implications. That's why environmental regulations and local communities engagement has to be priority for not only for the companies but also governments to be able to provide the right schemes so that the projects are sustainable in terms of the development. Skills and training is an important one as well, because many oil and gas degrees in the universities have been going down because of the expectations that the demand will go down and the sector will not need as much skills and people. However, there's a loss for geothermal because of the interskills between the oil and gas industry is quite high. So I think investments on that sense is quite important by the governments. So the heat maps are quite important as a first place to not only to identify the potential, but to see the other infrastructure around that potential and what is the cost-effective way of achieving certain geothermal deployment in a given time. There are many European citizens who started this, especially in Germany, which is a requirement now, if I remember correctly. It's quite important to have these heat maps or heating and cooling maps and how geothermal can play a role there. The other one is the de-risking mechanisms. Obviously, there's a lot of risks involved in the geothermal in the pre-development process, which means the drilling and finding the resource and making sure that the resource is there and will be available for years to come. That's why de-risking policies such as insurances, certain guarantees, and so on and so forth are quite important. For electricity generation, remuneration schemes for flexibility and ancillary services obviously makes the case for geothermal because it has a dispatchable technology. Hydropower is in the same situation with geothermal on this topic. The reason why no new investment decisions are made, even no new maintenance decisions are made for hydropower, is related to very low flexibility pricing mechanisms within the Europe or globally. Obviously, in order to create cost reduction, we need R&D and development of technical standards. And above all, as a person working at the IEA, international cooperation is quite key to achieve these cost reductions and deployment going forward. Again, thank you very much for this webinar and for the invitation. I hope that we have a lot of good ideas that are being discussed and are included in the European future official reports or planning, and the geothermal sector finally takes off on the implementation scale. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Amy. Really great presentation, and thank you for your support to the geothermal sector. You could see in the Q&A also chat, you have also allowed many people to comment on what IEA is proposing. So your colleague Martin also commented, and you could see that indeed what you do is a really great job in IEA. Thank you very much. I will now give the floor to the last speaker of the day before we open a Q&A session, and it's Ivo Stier, member of the European Parliament. He's not able to join us live, but we have a video recorded. So let's hear the view of the European Parliament. Ivo, the floor is yours.
And thank you for giving me the opportunity to contribute to this important discussion through a video message. Although I cannot join you in person, it is a pleasure to address colleagues from the Commission and representatives of the geothermal sector at a time when Europe must take decisive action. Let me start with the essential point. Europe needs a standalone geothermal strategy and action plan, accompanied by a legislative proposal. What matters most is not simply drafting another communication or an annex to an annex. What matters is providing geothermal with a clear political identity, a coherent regulatory framework, and a stable basis for long-term investment. The United States, China, India, and others are rapidly scaling their geothermal industries. Europe cannot afford to send a signal of hesitation or fragmentation. A standalone plan, supported by legislation, is the only way to show that geothermal is a strategic priority for Europe's competitiveness, security, and affordability. Second, this action plan must unlock investment. Today, geothermal faces structural disadvantages because the financial and regulatory system was built around other renewables. One example is the EU taxonomy. If we want capital to flow into geothermal, then geothermal must be placed on equal footing with solar and wind within the taxonomy framework. Investors need clarity and the assurance that geothermal meets the same sustainability criteria as established renewable technologies. At the same time, we must address the most significant obstacle in the sector, the upfront drilling risk. The future Decarbonization Bank, in cooperation with the European Investment Bank, should create dedicated guarantees, insurance mechanisms, and blended financial instruments to make early-stage geothermal development bankable and scalable. Third, The action plan must include clear and measurable targets. Without targets, there is no direction, no accountability, and no acceleration. Other renewable sectors benefit from indicative goals that send strong market signals. Geothermal deserves the same. Today, Europe sees around 8 to 12 new geothermal district heating investments per year. This is promising, but it is nowhere near enough to transform Europe's energy system or strengthen our energy sovereignty. Targets would provide the strategic clarity and urgency needed to expand deployment. Fourth, Europe must address the challenge of permitting procedures, especially for cities and local authorities. Many municipalities are ready to move forward with geothermal projects, but they face long, complex, and unpredictable permitting processes. If Europe wants geothermal to grow, we need a permitting framework that is faster, clearer, and more consistent across member states. Simplifying these procedures is one of the most direct ways to boost deployment. Fifth, we need better access to geological data. Too many projects stall simply because developers, SMEs, and municipalities lack reliable and accessible information. A unified open access EU platform for geological and geothermal data would greatly reduce uncertainty and allow more communities to make informed decisions about geothermal development. All these elements, a standalone strategy, a legislative proposal, taxonomy reform, de-risking, deployment targets, simplified permitting, and accessible geological data must be the backbone of a comprehensive European geothermal strategy and action plan. Colleagues, Europe has the potential. We have the technology. What we need now is the political framework to unlock it. The Commission has a crucial responsibility here. The time has come to move beyond fragmented initiatives and deliver a robust, ambitious, and actionable plan that positions geothermal at the heart of Europe's energy transition. Thank you.
Thank you a lot, Member of European Parliament, Ivo Stier. And you always bring a good support to our sector. And indeed, your words, hopefully, will be here by the European Commission because we need this geothermal action plan. Thank you all for having joined this first part of the webinar, hearing the EGEC proposal, the view of the Commission, the input from IEA, and the view of the European Parliament. Now, the floor is open for discussion. You have three ways of intervening during this discussion. You can ask to open your mic and raise your question orally. You can use the chat if you want to exchange your views and use the Q&A session. We had a question first to you, Amy, if you are still with us.
I'm with you.
Yes, so it was regarding your comments on the transfer of expertise from oil and gas industry to bring down the cost in geothermal energy development. Now, it's a point you refer to. Mr. I have to pronounce it, Yu Zhen Wu, probably coming from Asia. He said that we hear a lot of complaints about lack of skills in Europe, but he said this is not true. There are many available skilled workers out there waiting for such great opportunities. So probably what will be your recommendation to allow this to happen? Because indeed we have some skilled workers, but it's probably to make them fitting to work in geothermal.
Yeah, thank you very much for this question. So as I mentioned, skills have always part that is not really, that comes at the last minute to mind, but it should be in the first, because without these without the people, we cannot make these projects happen. I think one thing is quite important is to make sure that the industry is promoted in a way so that these people who are in these engineering schools or geological studies, they can basically transfer their knowledge towards the sector by taking specific training. Because I think there are two ways. One is the government who are basically facilitating this training or this kind of skill set development. The other thing is the companies, obviously, either by the support of the government or European Union funds that they invest into these development of these skills. and directing them to the sector actually, which they are used practically. That's the most important component. And for this, I mean, there are multiple ways of doing this, but making the sector an attractive way to work where is quite important to be able to do that, I will say. It takes some time, but we need to find the right tools to reach the right people to be able to provide this kind of knowledge and skills.
Thank you. I mean, indeed, you're fully right on this statement, and hopefully we see new initiative now to allow these skills. And when you say skills, I think we should agree that it's not only professional but also capacity building for authorities, because without that the permitting will not be straightforward if we are not adding enough effort in making capacity building, in having trained permitting authorities and more staff, because we need also resources to develop this permitting. Now we have a question to Sanjeev.
Philippe, yes, I'm here.
Yes, so there's a question from Dragutin Domitrovic. For sure, your statement about subsidies would have raised some questions and concerns about that. You say that we are not asking as a sector subsidies, but then you mentioned CFD, contract for difference, which is a kind of prem subsidy. So maybe can you deep dive a bit more and clarify what we mean indeed by subsidies?
Yes, kind of flat rate, the kind of old-fashioned flat rate subsidies where payments were made irrespective of the market situation was evolved at a European level almost nearly a decade ago. And for power-related plays, we have contracts for difference. So contracts for difference operate in two ways. You agree a strike price, and as long as the price of energy on the market is above the strike price, there is no subsidy. If the price falls, and then therefore the project developer is losing, there is financial finances injected back into that project to cover the difference between the current energy price and the strike-through price. So it's a different type of financial support to what we've had in the past, which was just simply a subsidy that stays the same for X number of years or a decade or so. It's a completely different framework. Contracts of difference or two-way contracts of difference are an important innovation that was made in the European framework, and it's something that we fully endorse. It's not simply just give us loads of money, but it's let's make sure that if the market does change and the energy project is uncompetitive, that there's a way to ensure that the project developer doesn't lose out from that. So I hope that's helped clarify that important point, but it's a very good question to ask. Contracts of difference, and certainly geothermal specific contracts of difference, are very, very important. And what we want to do is to ensure that they look at the full value and benefits that geothermal provides to an energy system. So it's not just one application. It could be geothermal electricity with heating, or geothermal electricity with heating and or mineral extraction, or the most sustainable and socially protective means. These are the things that we need to program into the European support for geothermal. I hope I've answered your question.
Yeah, partially, but you should stay on board. Sanjeev, there's a question we can probably answer together. I can start and you can complement. So indeed, there's a question also from Mahmoud Al-Gaya saying what pathways we can see in Europe happening to attract geothermal investors. So first, I can answer on drilling risk mitigation. Indeed, we have several drilling risk mitigation scheme available, nearly a PPP system in France. It exists in Netherlands for decades. In Hungary, they are launching several schemes. One is existing in Switzerland, which is about to be reformed, and more are to come. What we ask is that in many countries, one is not existing, and it will be probably more resource efficient to have it at a pan-European base. So it's a proposal we make in our action plan to the Commission, is to finally achieve this pan-European risk insurance scheme. Tax, customs and reductions in Europe, legislation are partially European, but many at national level. We work mainly on having preference VAT regime for geothermal technologies, but also there are other reform on VAT, on gas and electricity taxation that can be favorable for geothermal, especially geothermal heat pumps. We refer to R&D support, and we are seeing more, but not enough. Why I say more is because 2024 was a record year in European funding for geothermal research innovation project, but it's not enough. I see here a comment from Lucy Yanku, for example, presenting the EGDI. Indeed, the Geosurveys platform is fantastic. It's a 20 million European project, but it's based on existing data. Private developers just in geothermal have invested 50 million euros in the last 3 years on 3D exploration campaign to acquire more data. So indeed, we need to acquire more data, and if the public is contributing, the private sector is also doing a great job. Indeed, today, 2/3 of RNI is done by the private and 1/3 is done by the public sector. Sanjeev, maybe you can indeed, you will answer contract for different, but indeed, what kind of schemes you will see for geothermal electricity? Because today we discuss a lot of heating and cooling, but what would we need for geothermal power?
Well, again, the de-risking scheme would help, but there are also non-financial things which are, non-financial measures which are equally important, permitting being a crucial part of it. The permitting process for a geothermal power plant is even more complex than a geothermal power district heating and cooling system. So finding ways in which you can streamline that process to make sure that from the point of an application being made, a feasibility study being signed off to actual completion of the project could be done much quicker. I think that has a speed to market is a very important aspect in the power sector. Given the Electrification Act, the Electrification Action Plan that Mechtild mentioned earlier, the kind of de facto implicit electrification target that the European Commission has already proposed, it's important that geothermal power has that same route to market that other renewable energy solutions have. So whilst it's important to look at the finance, it's also important to look at the non-financial barriers that we can unlock through regulatory drivers. But in terms of the additional support that's needed, greater clarity on what the strike price would be for a contracts for difference, but also making sure that member states in their power auctions have dedicated features for geothermal, again, grows that market and allows it much easier for investors to deliver their product to scale.
Thank you, Sanjeev. Maybe I will answer now the next question from Robert Part, which is one of my favorite topic, is cost of drilling and potential drilling cost reduction. It was surprising to see that the author of the article you mentioned said that it's a plateau today and is not expecting any large reduction in drilling or exploration costs in geothermal. Just look at Ivor, no? Amy was really great to report that today Ivor loop in Gary Street produce electricity. Just look at the report on the cost reduction for this closed loop system from the first well to the last well they drill now, the 12 legs connected. There's a lot of potential for cost reduction. Cost reduction will happen with 3 elements, according to us: research and innovation of all drilling technologies, some at low TRL level, some close to market technologies. We will need some breakthrough technologies in geothermal drilling. Also, development. We know that if you have multiple wells, you have a gain of 20% from the next well. So when you drill, you learn a lot of, and the next well will be 20% less expensive. Last but not least, we are lacking in Europe of a fluid drilling market. There's not enough possibility for drilling companies to work in another country. We are not lacking rigs, we are lacking a fluidity in the market. And probably this is more working on market conditions to allow this to happen. Another question to you now, Sanjeev. Organ subsidies. And it's from Marlon Branche, from Austria. It's more regarding geothermal heat pumps. How do you see geothermal heat pump system in a non-mature market without subsidies?
Yeah, okay, that's a really good question. And actually, there's some really good examples here in Belgium. We're based in Brussels. The southern, the government of Wallonia, which is in South Belgium, they introduced a series of grants to really drive the geothermal market in the region. They identified in 2018 through their own renewable energy strategy a need to really boost geothermal. And as they kind of worked through the steps to get there, what they realized is that they need to kind of grow the local expertise to understand what it is and try and establish companies that are able to firstly design geothermal systems, particularly network geothermal systems, but also be able to scale up to kind of build out a whole industrial sector there. So there they did do, I think it was 2, maybe 3 rounds of grants, around about 30 million, but they specified the type of project. So if I can recall correctly, in the very first round, there was a focus on a split between public building applications and private building applications, some high street ones, and I think like of the 35 million euros that was awarded through grants, there were 34 projects targeting things like the Paradisa Zoo, which if you ever come to Belgium is a fantastic place to take your kids to. You'll absolutely adore it. That converted to geothermal. They looked at high street banks, pharmacies, the kind of places where you would interact on a daily basis and kind of build awareness around geothermal. The success of this subsidy program has meant that it's led to 1 or 2 companies actually becoming international experts when it comes to designing network geothermal systems and different types of geothermal heat pumps, and they're now kind of winning contracts outside Belgium as well. So it's, sometimes we use words and they have a connotation that takes us into a different place. This was a series of investments that were made to grow your local supply chain. And I think the challenge for us in the energy community is to kind of remove the blinkers we have on energy and view geothermal as an industrial policy driver. We're talking about, yes, investments in the energy system, but we're talking about the manufacturing value chains, the expertise that goes with it that can be fully exported, the technologies themselves which can be fully exported. This is a great market. There are opportunities all over the place. We need to grow the pool of support that's required. So if you are a country that's starting off, then actually grants is a good way to kickstart the market. What we're saying is that you do not need grants once you have a fully mature market. Conventional signals, like you have here in Brussels with the full application of the net zero industry building definition, it's a slightly different one from the European one, but it's sufficient enough to ensure that every commercial building has a geothermal heat pump installed. De facto, it is a technology of the default technology simply because the market conditions have been designed like that. But in order to get to that stage, you have to build up your local industry and understanding amongst the consumer base as to what geothermal is. So that's a fantastic question that was asked. There is a good example around this one. You need to grow. And we're all, many countries are coming and many regions are coming at different levels of development. And for those who require additional support at earlier stages of development, time-sensitive subsidies are super important up to the point at which you reach market maturity.
Thank you, Sanjeev. Amy, if you're still with us, we have 2 questions to IEA.
Yes.
So first, it's a question from our colleague from the USA, and he said, writing from there, the proposal makes so much sense to have targets and to develop geothermal. So what you expect and how do you propose to work together to grow geothermal globally? The first question. So what is the next step from IEA? And a specific question, because indeed in the geothermal sector, we really like your report, the special report on geothermal energy. So no, there's also a request from Marco Baresi from Turbulence. So is IEA planning to do also a study on the supply chain and export opportunities on manufacturing?
The answer to the first question from Zainab, it's a difficult one, how to do the interactions. I mean, how to transfer the US knowledge to Europe or Japanese knowledge to all around the world, or vice versa. I think on our part, from the IEA, we are trying to emphasize geothermal and its potential in many meetings that we hold with the governments. And what we are trying to do when a government asks us for an advice, or when we do the energy policy review of the countries, we try to include the best practices of geothermal cases to these reports so that government officials can see what is being done so far. The same thing that we do with our interactions with regional organizations such as Southeast Asia or Latin America and so on and so forth. So we are trying to play our role in the sense that to communicate geothermal better to an audience who actually is not technical, but is at the decision-making role to put up into the energy agenda. This is our role on our side, and I think geothermal community, for all of you who were in the workshop that we organized for the Future of Geothermal report, I see many similar names are also here. I was impressed at the time, and I mentioned at the end of the meeting, if you remember, that the geothermal sector's language is quite easy to understand when I compare with other technologies, when I sit around the similar things. I think this is a great advantage. But I think the most important thing is to use this advantage more widely around the world and trying to cooperate better and hang on to the low-hanging fruits, I would say, because there are a lot of low-hanging fruits that can be collected and exploited. I think we should start from those and go deep into the innovation. And from the European context, Europe has a lot of disadvantages, let's be honest, in terms of the competitiveness, electricity prices, and so on and so forth. I will say that there are three key words which Sanjay mentioned in his presentation towards the end, highlighted these words. These three words are very small words, but the meanings are very deep for policymakers and society. Affordability, security, and sustainability. So maybe sustainability is not widely accepted today in the current geopolitical context, but affordability and security is quite important. If you put geothermal into security and affordability context, you can win a lot of the policymakers' attention in a very short period of time. These are the two key words that also the European Union high-level officials are looking for, because current context tells us this, and I think we should take this on our head and then move forward with it. I will say it's quite important in terms of the global cooperation and learning to use these keywords everywhere we go, and how geothermal can benefit out of that. In terms of the IEA work, there was also another question related to the solar thermal and geothermal. I read it on the thing. I'll combine them also. IEA has included geothermal in many more publications, in many more dialogues since we published the Future of Geothermal report. Now we report separately in the World Energy Outlook tables, famous tables, geothermal, in the cost assumptions. Again, this may look like a small thing to add a line in these things, but it's actually a big deal. Many of the energy professionals will understand what does this mean, because you're putting one technology who is quite small today, but it has a great potential in the equal energy balance with the other technologies. So it's a start on our side, but we will continue doing this. So we will also have in our innovation work more and more this kind of an innovation in our dialogue, and we are trying to put geothermal into our ministerial discussion as well within the innovation framework, which will happen in February. It's the most important meeting that happens for the IEA every other year. It will be, we are trying to organize it. It's a closed-door meeting with the IEA ministers. So that's one of the other things that we are trying to do. We are doing our part, but obviously we are not an organization which has money, meaning that the money to invest in these technologies, like World Bank, like IFC, like European Investment Bank, like EBRD, and so on and so forth. I think the role of these institutions, also to complement Zeynep's question, is quite important. They have money. We have voice, they have money. So the combination of these two is quite important. We also work with them quite closely. But I have this perception of these development banks are still stuck at the challenges and difficulties of the traditional geothermal sector. I think you guys should take them out of the sphere as well, that there is a new world out there, which is not the same as you have been dealing with Latin America, Southeast Asia, and so on and so forth. It is different now. It will take for them to adjust to this, but I think the role of you and other industrial organizations are quite important to convince them, to teach them that geothermal sector is not the same anymore, it's different, and it has a different momentum, and they should follow us. I will finish with that.
Thank you,
Do you
Amy.
mind
Yes,
if I
indeed.
just respond to that one? I think what you said is 100% the right thing to do. I also think what we need to do is to, kind of paraphrase John F. Kennedy. Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. I think we as an association based in Brussels should be reaching out to our counterparts in America and the rest of the world, and looking at the kind of high level government actions that kind of Jaime outlined, but there's actually full recognition that much of geothermal is very local. It's local governments who drive geothermal heating and cooling systems across Europe. They've been our most vocal champions. I mean, the beauty of the industry from an outsider perspective is the fact that it's grown so much through word of mouth. You have really enthusiastic people who are driving and providing the energy source. So kind of my point to Zainab's question is that there's a lot that we can do together to bring local voices, because that acting local is where the investments are going to be. But we should be looking at kind of, the different states within the United States, looking at different regions and countries within Europe, and kind of getting that local connection up and running. So there's a lot of ways in which we can work together. And quite frankly, this is a challenge for us as an industry. Whilst it'd be great to have Jaime and their colleagues from the IEA, this is something we as an industry need to be much more focused on and really driving ourselves. So the action is for us before we go to somebody else. Over to you, Philippe.
Yes, so it went 5 minutes. We have 5 questions, so let's do one per minute now. There's a question from Soren Skjold Andersen from Thermoti in Denmark to see, okay, what we should do now for shallow geothermal and specifically network geothermal. It's a topic we are working on for a while. Indeed, it's a key topic. We have 2.5 million geothermal heat pumps. The market is stagnating in 2025. It's a nonsense. It's one of the best technology you may have to decarbonize your building, being for an individual building, for a large building, or for a network of buildings, not like a network of shallow geothermal wells. We are seeing some development also in research and innovation, or expecting some new technologies to come, like robot drilling. We are hearing, and you can see next week in the publication of EGEC Innovation Trends Report, some news about this automated drilling rig. As mentioned by Sanjeev, there's a lot of non-technical issues for shallow geothermal to look at permitting. We refer to the case of France, where you have online map for permitting to have a declaration and a fast permitting. We discussed also non-subsidies topics, taxation, the ratio gas and electric price is one of the key topics in geothermal. But let's indeed look at all the different elements. Come back to what we had in 2023, a 20% annual growth rate.
Philippe, if I could just add 2 more things to that one. I think there's 2 developments which are very, very attractive, and the things that we're keeping our eyes on. So the first one is in the shallow market is to look at different business models that are evolving. You'll have heard some really fantastic announcements about leasing geothermal heat pumps, leasing networks, but also working with key consumer markets. This is why we really did highlight in the Industrial Alliance, specific dedicated working streams with specific consumers in mind. I can give you an example of social housing providers, the public building operators. They see their values as a long-term asset, and therefore they fully understand the benefits that geothermal brings. What we have to do is to allow the business models to evolve so that you can have a different type of energy company, perhaps an energy services company, really driving that market. a lot of these solutions are less technology, much more market driven. And I think this is one of the things that we are going to be exploring in our upcoming paper on network geothermal. So keep your eyes and ears open for that sometime next year. Back to you, Philippe.
Thank you, Sanjeev. Well, for the question of Yan Yong is saying that yes, a new technology is looking for investors. I hope investors that have joined the call today can take note of this call. And we organize regularly webinars, B2B, B2 match session where you can present and pitch your project.
Super.
I will now answer the question on skills and Sanjeev prepare for the next question, which is about geothermal in Bulgaria. So first, the question from Oscar Cooper on geoenergy skills and training, what we are doing as EGEC and in Europe. Let's start maybe on deep geothermal or for geothermal district heating, geothermal electricity, next-gen technologies. We are working with Orient to have a network of different training centers to collaborate together. You have a lot of master or already existing in geothermal energy, and let's see how they can have a coordination. It already exists. We hear 2 days ago when we had the Geothermal Innovation Days in the University of Strasbourg, now some collaboration between universities, but I'm sure we can have that. Also to promote MOOC, these online courses and geothermal just recently has been announced a collaboration between Saipem and CNR in Italy to promote this MOOC. You can find a lot of information online already. On shallow geothermal heat pumps, for more than 10 years, we have GeoTrained, this association to promote training activities. So if you want to know more, liaise with GeoTrained. And here also, I encourage you to look at the MOOC because we have done also online training course on shallow geothermal. It's the MOOC GeoBoost, and you can all information also online. Regarding Bulgaria, Sanjeev, what can you say?
Yeah, so the actual question is about the anomaly in Bulgaria. And to be honest, that's the best way to describe it. If you look at Bulgaria from just as a classic deep and shallow geothermal perspective, the potential for geothermal is huge. I was with the former energy minister earlier this week, Julian Popov, and we were talking about kind of how do we grow geothermal? What is needed? And this is where the national roadmaps that we mentioned earlier, together with that target, are super important to unlock the politics in Bulgaria. There is a pool of expertise already there. There's a lot of potential there. Organizing and accessing the kind of structures that are needed to grow the market are readily available, but that target is super, super important. Now, one of the things that that we're going to try as EGEC is to try and get some kind of regional conversation. So, there's a lot of expertise and projects that are growing in markets like Poland and in Hungary. Both these countries have roadmaps. And next year, on the 29th of October, happy to announce that we'll be organising our very first Central and Eastern European Regional Geothermal Congress. And that's really an opportunity to get this cross-collaboration going. As we've been mentioning, the theme of what we've been saying for the last hour and a half is that we don't necessarily need to have new legislation. There's a lot of expertise out there. What we need to do is to help one another grow our markets, because our objective is to raise the floor for geothermal so that it becomes mainstream everywhere. To do that, you need to talk to people in your region or your peers, specifically who've gone through the geothermal journey. They are the best people to talk to. Our role is to put everyone in the same room and allow the magic to happen. So 29th of October 2026 in Bucharest, Romania, the very first Regional Geothermal Congress.
Thank you, Sanjeev. And now we come to the last question of the day because time is already over, from Serge Van Gessel from Geosurveys also, referring to the Geoservice online EGDI tool, how to update it. Indeed, if we look at as a geothermal sector, maybe indeed we should distinguish what we have for shallow geothermal and what we should have for deep geothermal. For shallow geothermal, we need to exchange between authorities to have this geothermal map, potential map, but mainly permitting map, not to have a fast permitting. And it exists only in a few countries, and this traffic light system should be replicated all over Europe. So we expect also from Geosurveys and Geological Service of Europe to have a collaboration to allow this cooperation and exchange of best practices. On deep geothermal, let's be frank. If we want to reach the target we set of 250 gigawatts, we will need to go to greenfield areas. It means we'll need much more exploration. And it's why we have a record year in 24, and we'll have a record year in 25 on exploration campaign, especially 3D seismic campaign, because we need to acquire new data. So indeed, we welcome the work done on the Geocal Service for Europe, GSEU project, but indeed, we also, as you, ask for more support because we need to update this map and we need especially to complement with that this map on region where we are lacking data. And if we lack data, of course, we need exploration, but we need drilling. So we need a funding program on drilling wells is crucial if we want to achieve that. It cannot be only public funding, it should be public partnership, and in the action plan, we refer to that in several times. With that, I think it's time to close the webinar. I was really glad to have more than 250 people joining today in a Friday afternoon. Great presentation from Mektil from the European Commission, Amy from IEA, and Ivo from the European Parliament. We thank you. Thank you, Sanjay, for presenting this overall EGEC action plan proposal to have a commission having a dedicated strategy and action plan next year. The document is available with 9 key recommendations. With that, I thank you all for attending this webinar. I wish you a good end of the day and a good weekend. Bye-bye.